Ladies and gentlemen, there has been some very big news in the Wuthering Waves space. Of course, if you've been keeping up with version 2.2 and its trailer, you know that we're getting something a little bit spicy in this patch. And that's, of course, going to be the Aero version of Rover. And what Kuro Games has come out with is not just a teaser, but the full entire kit of what this unit is going to do. And what I wanted to do was walk through every single part of it, talk about who some of their best teammates might be, and a lot of their future potential moving forward, because I'm going to be entirely real here. You might think based off their initial kit that they're just for Aero units, but I think they're going to have a lot more potential than that. And I'll break down a couple of the reasons for why. So with that, let's go ahead. Let's get right on into it, looking at some of the baseline details. They're of course going to be the Aero attribute. They're going to be using a sword as well. Essential materials. These are all stuff from 1.0. You shouldn't be worrying too much about this, especially considering, you know, most people do have their Rover leveled up to 90 right now, especially with how strong the Havoc version is, and especially with how strong the Spectral version is. The thing that is different from some of their prior versions is, of course, their skill mats. And let me be real here when I say that you will not really be able to pre-farm for this unit properly, because they use a new weekly boss mat called When Irises Bloom. That's going to be released with the 2.2 patch. I don't think we got a teaser of what the new weekly boss is. It might actually just be Cartithia, like in her dark form. And so you're going to need those to fully level up this character's abilities, but you should be able to get them to at least level 6 before requiring your weekly boss mats. This is just a Phoebe intro skill at level 6, and that's when it starts requiring the weekly boss mats. So you'll be able to level up the character to there before needing those resources. Moving on, let's get into their normal attack. Their normal attack is going to be 4 consecutive strikes as their basics. Nothing too crazy, nothing too special, nothing that really stands out over here. However, they do have a special interaction with their heavy attack, where after using the heavy attack, consuming the stamina, and using that move, they can use a normal attack right after to get into stage 3. They then have a special heavy attack called Razor Wind, where after they hold their normal attack after casting stage 3, which they can do right after their regular heavy attack, or after their dodge counter, or simply a regular heavy attack, they can use Razor Wind, which is going to be additional damage, bit more of a unique move, and it's also going to interact with some of their other abilities. So this could be a character where you just spam the heavy attacks, or it could be a character where you're chaining together heavies and basics. I'll love to see the amount of like variation, love to see the sort of like fluidity that's in the kit. They really focus on making the MC pretty fun to play over at Kuro Games, and the number of interactions that we're seeing in just like their baseline attack chain is pretty damn cool. A lot of different combos you'll be able to do, a lot of different inputs, all to kind of get to this enhanced heavy attack that we're seeing over here. Next up, they have their mid-air attack. They can simply do a regular plunge, and then using a normal attack right after landing is going to take you into basic attack stage 4. And I have one character in particular who has a similar interaction to this, and it's actually Chain Li. Chain Li has similar interactions like this, where, you know, she's in the air, you do a plunge, and then you can follow up with other attacks in her chains, right? And then gain access to things like her true sight. It's pretty cool. It lets her advance forward her combos and then build up resources that way. And you'll see how it all pans out for Aero Rover. So that's one way that they've been taking, you know, some of the past kit influences. That's an example of what it might look like in terms of interactions. And when it comes to that mid-air attack that, you know, where you plunge and then you can advance to the next stage, you can also use it to activate Rover's Forte skill, which is the resonance skill Unbound Flow. And that's something that's going to require you to build up a resource called Wind Strings. We'll get into those in just a bit. And then their dodge counter, right, is going to be used to elevate their attack chain, give them access to things like their heavy attack Razor Wind, etc., etc. Pretty cool attack chain. Lots of cool stuff you can do with that. A lot of variability in the kit. Now let's get into their resonance skill. This one is going to be called Illusion Breaker, and it's going to have 2 different types of attacks. The first one, Awakening Gale, is where you just jump into the air and then proceed to slash the target, and you're going to deal some arrow damage with that one. Your second one is going to be called Skyfall Severance. While you're in the middle of the air, you'll cast your resonance skill to use a different effect, which is going to basically convert all existing stacks of debuffs from Spectral Frazzle to Havoc Bane to Fusion Burst to Glacio Chafe to Electro Flare. You're going to remove all of those from the target. Do keep in mind we can only apply Spectral currently. And then you're going to inflict 1 stack of Aero Erosion for each stack removed. And so with the way that debuffs work in the game currently, you can build up to 10 stacks of Spectral Frazzle with Phoebe in her confession state, and that's going to be kind of the only debuff you'll be able to convert. And so if you're looking to activate this conversion mechanic, unfortunately, since Aero Rover means you can't use Spectral Rover, Phoebe in her confession state, right, where she's applying 5 stacks of Spectral Frazzle like you're seeing over here, or where she's applying it via her Liberation, this is kind of the only way that you'll be able to interact with at least this cast of the Resonance skill in the current. I'm not sure how it's going to be. I think it's just being used as an example in the live stream trailer. I don't think I'm going to recommend it right now, but it does kind of show that Aero Rover is going to be very multi-rolled in the future, because when there is a new character that has the Havoc Bane, a new character that has a Fusion Burst, a new character that has any of these debuffs, they'll be able to essentially leverage their kit to fuel arrow damage. And that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that they can sort of just like funnel all of those elemental debuff effects in one way or another. And it gives them, in my point of view, at the very least, a lot of scalability into the future. And it gives them a lot of future use cases. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like setting the stage so that power creep doesn't happen for this unit. Then we have the Resonance Liberation, and this thing's going to be called Omega Storm. Pretty simple to use. It's simply going to deal arrow damage in an AoE and then heal everybody on the team. You're also going to be able to cast it while you're in midair, but close to the ground. And we're just going to be using Chang-Li as another example, right? She can cast her Resonance Liberation while she's, you know, floating in the air, and then just do an attack that way. So from at least what I'm seeing, a lot of inspiration, at least for Aero Rover's kit, is being taken from the design of Chang-Li and how she can like advance various attack chains, use her ultimate or liberation while in the air, etc., etc. And that means that Rover might actually have a lot of very interesting quick swap potential. So that's going to be really something cool for us to look forward to if you're a type of player that enjoys those sort of mechanics. And now we have the big part of their kit. This is probably the most important part of everything, because their basic attack is inherently linked to this, and so is their intro skill, and essentially every other ability in their kit. That Forte circuit is going to be called a Cycle of Wind, and the first part is a mid-air attack called Cloud Burst Dance. And so they'll be able to do 2 consecutive attacks that all deal arrow damage, considered resonance skill, so they're going to be a resonance skill focused damage dealer, and they're also going to heal everybody on the team after using those attacks. And it can be cast in 3 different ways. You use the normal attack right after using Awakening Gale, which is, if you're familiar with it, the attack where you jump into the air and then slash the target. You can follow up with those basic attacks over there. Or you use your normal attacks right after casting an intro skill. You'll be able to chain together those 2. Or you use a normal attack right after casting Razor Wind. And we just talked about, right, how all of the different ways you'll be able to actually use this ability, right? After your basic attack stage 3, your dodge counter, or a regular heavy attack. There's a lot of different ways to access these unique mid-air attacks, and you're going to want to do them extremely frequently across your rotations. And that's because those mid-air attacks are the only way you'll be able to use wind strings and basically this enhanced resonance skill that's going to be very powerful. So when you're at max wind strings, the Awakening Gale skill becomes Unbound Flow, and you're going to perform up to 2 consecutive air attacks, with each one consuming 60 wave strings, dealing arrow resonance skill damage, and switching to another resonator after stage 1 will automatically trigger stage 2. And so this is kind of like built in like swapping ability, almost a little bit like an outro skill, where simply swapping while using this attack is going to chain together the next one. And so, you know how I mentioned stuff, right, about this character maybe being a little bit more swap heavy, having more synergy with swap? This is just another example of it, you know, and you also have to factor in how many attacks they can use in the air as well. Rover can hold up to 120 wind strings. You consume 60 on each attack, and each stage of your mid-air attack, this Cloud Burst Dance with all the different ways to access it, is going to restore 25, which means you typically want to use 4 of these mid-air attacks, or basically cast it 2 times, and then proceed to use your intro skill along with that to generate the last 20. 100 from 4 attacks in the Cloud Burst Dance, 20 for your intro skill, you're maxed up and you're ready to use that enhanced resonance skill. You also have different ways of triggering it, using your basic attack stage 3 or 4, as well as a dodge counter, is going to restore 10 win streaks too. And so that's like another way you'll be able to build up the 20 in case you're not using an intro skill in your rotation. Overall, I gotta say that this character has a lot of fluidity, has a lot of potential, just in terms of, you know, they can be swapped to in the air, they can continue their air attacks, they land on the ground, they do their plunges, they can build up to other moves that'll let them continue their air attacks, and it's pretty clear that they're really focused on dealing damage while in the air, and they even have the ability to swap in the middle of their attacks and then continue their attack chain without any actual input from the player. That essentially means off-field damage, and that is pretty cool. And now they got their last part of their kit, which is probably the most simple. It really is only 3 words. Relentless Squall, their intro skill, deal arrow damage. It, of course, chains into their other attacks and then gives them access to the unique mid-airs, but yeah, that's it. And now their outro skill. And this has to be probably the most specific part of their kit. It's called Storm's Echo, and it grants the Aeolian Realm to all nearby resonators in the team for 30 seconds. So a very long duration one that persists through swap, so you don't have to worry about too much there. Upon hitting a target, increase the maximum stack of arrow erosion the target can receive by 3 for 10 seconds. This effect is not stackable. And so I don't believe we currently know the maximum number of stacks of arrow erosion there can be on the enemy. It is a damage over time effect, so it has a pretty cool visual one over here, like kind of like this unique little ring that's going to be surrounding the resonator. But since Aero Rover is currently the only character that can apply this erosion, I don't think this outro skill is going to feel or seem very powerful in the present. I do believe that maybe with the addition of more arrow erosion characters or more debuff appliers, this ability is going to have a bit more use, but I would say currently you're probably not going to be focusing on this outro skill when it comes to using Aero Rover in the team. However, Aero Rover's damage amplification, Aero Rover's like supporting ability, is a little bit understated here, and that's because of one thing: the free 5-star weapon that is going to be accompanying them. And when you look at how this free 5-star weapon synergizes with their kit, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about over here, and it's going to relate specifically to the resonance skill Unbound Flow. So let's get right on into that and see what it looks like. This is going to be Rover's 5-star weapon, and the most important thing to look at over here is the weapon skill, specifically the last line of their weapon skill, and that's what I'm really going to be focusing on here today. When Rover, the Aero version, casts the resonance skill Unbound Flow, right? This thing over here that requires us to reach those 120 win strings from using our air attacks and our intro skill. Arrow damage dealt by nearby resonators on the field is amplified by 10 to 26%. But we have to think about it this way: every free weapon always has its free R5 version. And so this, you might as well not read any number on here except for the 26%, knowing how free weapons work in this game. And so that means, ladies and gentlemen, this weapon basically has one of the strongest outro skills in the game built into it specifically for Rover. This unfortunately does mean that Aero Rover is kind of tied to this weapon if they plan on doing any sort of supporting or buffing for Aero units in particular. They don't have to use it, but it's going to be highly recommended. It is a signature as well. And that basically means 26% damage amp for Aero. Let me show you how strong 26% damage amp is. It is better than some of the outro skills in this game. Alto's outro skill gives a 23% damage amp. It is better than every support's outro skill as long as you're doing arrow damage. Barina gives a 15% damage amp to every attribute, and it's better than half of an outro skill you might be seeing from a premium sub DPS like Rosia, where she does 20% havoc, 25% basic for 45 total. But this weapon, right, just gives 26% to the element, or 26% to the attribute. And what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is that Rover's buffing ability is actually kind of absolutely nuts, assuming that you're using arrow units. And when you wrap all of this together, right, into this kit that looks like it can pretty easily activate that Unbound Flow, you just use 4 of these attacks in your intro skill, and you have a ton of way of accessing these attacks in your kit. This character is going to be incredibly strong, and one of potentially the best buffers in the game, assuming that you plan on using arrow units. And this is just a small example of who you might be able to use this with in the very near future when 2.2 drops. You're probably going to want to use it in conjunction with either of these characters, where if you're using Yang Yang, maybe you're using a bit more of a quick swap heavy composition with a DPS character, right, that can quick swap as well. Like a triple quick swap sort of team, maybe a Chang Li, Yang Yang, Aero Rover sort of thing going down. Your APM is going to be nuts. Or you run this team where you have your Jian using arrow damage, you have your Aero Rover buffing the hell out of arrow damage, and then you have Alto doing the sub DPS role for Jian and then buffing all of their damage with that outro skill. And then when you stack this outro skill on top of the boost that you're going to be getting from this weapon, that's going to be basically a 49% damage amp for Jian. A 49% arrow damage amp for Jian, and then Alto's also going to be benefiting from a fair amount of damage amp too, just from Rover existing on the team. You could also naturally use Mortifi, right, as well, and then get Mortifi's 38% amp to heavy attack. You add that to Rover's 26%, and boy, oh boy, you'll be at 64% damage amp for every attack that Jian is making in his enhanced liberation state, as well as this gigantic nuke that he has on his Forte circuit. Those are all considered arrow and heavy attack damage, and it will receive that full 64%. All of this scaling that you're going to see over here. And I'm going to be honest, Aero Rover, at least in their current state, is a better support and will be a better support than units like Shorekeeper or Barina, because they are adding a whole 11% more damage amp over these options. And while they might not have the same, attack buffing potential, it'll pull out ahead. And this is the last thing that I haven't even focused on, because we've got one last piece of the puzzle when it comes to Aero Rover that we need to take a look at right now. The last piece of the puzzle that we're going to be looking at over here is the new Sonata set that is tailored to Aero Rover. Inflicting arrow erosion on enemies increases arrow damage for all resonators in the team by 15%, and for the resonator triggering this effect by an additional 15%, lasting for 20 seconds. And so, unfortunately, I don't actually know if Aero Rover can trigger arrow erosion by themselves. This might mean that, unfortunately, there needs to be like another applier on the team of the debuff. And so, while you might not be able to use the full potential of it right now, and you can only use it via conversion, this is going to exist as well for more buffing in the future. So, in the future, Aero Rover is probably going to be best in slot with the Rejuvenating Glow Sonata set, the one that's going to buff the attack of everybody on the team when they heal. This is probably going to be the go-to set for Aero Rover moving forward. And you're probably going to want to slot them with a decent amount of like DPS oriented stuff, maybe using like a crit damage fallacy of no return, or maybe like a crit rate fallacy of no return, because in combination with their weapon, giving them a pretty decent resonant skill damage buff, and I assume, right, a lot of the offensive stuff that they have on their kit focused on dealing attacks, a lot of attacks, I think it's going to be pretty strong. And so while this set, unfortunately, Aero Rover can't really make full use of this without having Phoebe on the team, this is something to look out for in the future, just in case there's another arrow erosion character that Rover is going to be able to synergize with. Because I'm not sure if this 5-piece, we're going to have to test this out a bit more. I'm not sure if this 5-piece effect will trigger as long as one person on the team applies arrow erosion, or if it's through the user's arrow erosion application. Because if Aero Rover can be paired with another DPS, or another sub DPS, or simply an arrow erosion applier, and they inflict it, there's a chance that Rover might have this set effect activate as well. And that'll be pretty cool. We'll just have to see if that's what actually happens. But overall, this unit is looking incredibly strong. This unit is looking incredibly good and is bringing a lot of potential to this game for more and more varied team comps. And considering the fact that they're absolutely free and their weapon, which has this incredible effect, is also completely free, boy, oh boy, this unit is going to shake the meta moving forward. And I am very excited to see everything that they can do. So with that, let me know what you all think about this unit and their potential, and peace out.